What should you say when your wife asks you if she looks fat in her dress? Can lying sometimes be justified if it's done to protect someone's feelings? Or is it bad across the board, no matter the circumstance? Would you say you're ever justified in killing an innocent child? Probably not. But what if that child grew up to be one of the most evil dictators of all time, and by killing him in his crib, you could avoid the suffering of millions? If you judge the rightness or wrongness of an action based on what consequences it brings about in the world, you're a so-called consequentialist. Some argue that one ought to live by certain absolute principles, like the Ten Commandments or the Code of Human Rights, because otherwise any atrocity, no matter how horrible, can be permissible in the name of a higher good. It's the danger of the mentality, you can't make an omelette without breaking a few eggs, that many despots of the 20th century espoused. There's a thought experiment that attempts to show the problem with consequentialism. Imagine you're a Jew in Germany under Hitler. You and your family of 5 are hiding in an attic struggling to keep quiet because the SS is downstairs searching the house. You have your 2-month-old baby in your arms that is about to start crying. And the only way to prevent the Nazis from discovering you is by smothering it. If you have some doubts that doing so would really be the most moral thing, you're not really a consequentialist, or so it is argued. Because from a strictly consequentialist point of view, the death of 1 is better than the death of 5. If your goal is to save the most amount of lives, what's wrong with killing and harvesting a healthy person's organs to save 5 people who are in desperate need of an organ transplant? This is used as an argument that there's a need for moral principles that can be applied universally, no matter the circumstance or the consequences. But there's no good reason why the only consequences to be considered should be the number of deaths resulting from an action, as if this were the only consequential difference in the given examples. A society in which anyone walking into a hospital has to live in fear that he might be killed and harvested for his organs has dire psychological consequences for its individual members. This would say a lot about how little value this society places on the welfare of individuals generally, if one were so readily sacrificed for the benefit of the many. It's strange that these considerations should be excluded from the summation of consequences this action has. In the case of smothering the baby to save the rest of the family, we struggle to call this moral, but not because we are blind to the consequences. On the contrary, we consider more than just a tally of deaths. Think of how it must be to live the rest of your life with the thought of having killed your own child with your bare hands. These are psychological consequences that shouldn't be left out of consideration. Mere survival is not always the most desirable outcome. There are situations in which you would rather die than having to live with unbearable guilt or shame. What other options for evaluating the goodness of an action other than its consequences do we have? I'd be highly suspicious of any moral code whose justification is completely divorceable from any consequences in the real world. The reason for living by certain principles that we hold sacrosanct is because they reliably produce good outcomes. Treating people as ends in themselves, and not as mere tools of manipulation, has good effects. It promotes altruistic behavior and stable societies. When it comes to any of our tried and true moral principles, we should only deviate from them with caution, and only if the consequences make it necessary.